We have a weird habit as a culture. When someone dies, especially if they're brilliant, we bleach the mess out of their story. We turn them into posters, quotes, Pinterest boards. Ooh. But here's the thing nobody likes to say out loud. Most of the people who changed the world were psychological disasters in daily life. Not evil, not stupid, not weak, just profoundly human. Tonight, we're not diagnosing anyone. We are pattern matching behavior using modern psychology. Now, what does that mean? That means we're going to look at people's patterns and we're going to say, look, based on these patterns, I think this guy had this or that. They're not labels, right? These are lenses. And if you recognize yourself in any of these people, congratulations. You're in legendary company, baby. Let's dig up the past, one body at a time. So, how does psychology look at history? I mean, before we start opening up these historical cold cases, right, we need like I don't know, a psychological Miranda warning. Look, we're not here to play armchair psychiatrist just to feel superior to other people. We're going to use the lens of modern science to humanize icons that we've turned into statues. Now, here are the ground rules, first of all. Mental health as a spectrum. We do not live in the sane versus crazy. We live on a sliding scale of functionality. Even a genius can be sliding toward the edge. Look at me, but I'm no genius. All right. So what does that mean? Well, number one, behavior does not mean diagnosis, right? A symptom is just a data point. To get a diagnosis, you have to have a cluster that causes significant distress or impairment. And then you got to look at context, right? Context is king. I mean, let's be honest. You can't really judge a 17th century monarch by 21st century TikTok standards. Am I right, my dudes? I mean, we have to look at the trauma. We got to look at the culture that they lived in, right? And the lead painted walls they lived in. Because let's be honest, lead paint is not fun. There's also the maladaptive solutions. Most disorders are just really the brain trying to survive. I mean, if you grew up in a war zone, paranoia isn't a glitch. It is a survival strategy that just forgot to turn off once the war was over. I mean, come on, dudes, this is easy stuff. Now, what frameworks are we going to use today, right? We're going to go ahead and use the DSM-5 TR, right? We're going to look at trait clusters. We're going to look at attachment theory to see how they loved. We're going to look at the Diathesis stress model, which posits that really everyone has a biological breaking point, right? That only gets triggered really when life turns up the heat, right? I mean, when things are going good, you don't really need to look at the stress model. So let's go ahead and start with one of my faves, right? And only because this guy was a beast in the music industry. And I mean, this guy grew up, around the same time I did. And he was putting out grunge songs while I was cutting my teeth in college. And this guy had the smile that hurt everywhere. And we are talking about Kurt Cobain. Kurt Cobain wasn't just sad. I mean, he was physically miserable. Some of the documented facts, he had chronic stomach pain since childhood. I mean, this is something that he sort of talked about in a number of interviews, and it was sort of life-altering for him in a really bad way. I mean, he likely had an undiagnosed gastrointestinal illness, right? And as a result of all this, in order to self-medicate, he became a severe heroin addict. I mean, he used it, right? And partially to help self-medicate from all this, stomach pain that he was going through. We also know that Kurt Cobain went into intense rumination. I mean, he would think about things from the past all of the time. And as a result of this, despite his massive success, he was deeply critical of himself. I mean, he did not like himself, according to all reports and his journals, some of his writings. And so when you look at some of his symptoms, anhedonia, which, is pretty much like relief, uh, his music, he admitted, brought relief, but it didn't bring him any joy after a while. He also had very sort of black white thinking. And, this is very possibly the reason that he eventually decided to choose ending it all instead of trying to sort of suffer through life. When you add all those things to the self-loathing that he had and you pair that with his empathy, because I mean, the guy, he was an artist, but he was also deeply empathetic. That's what all of his friends talked about, right? That he sort of really got people. And I mean, this guy would withdraw, right? He would withdraw from his friends despite connections with them, right? I mean, and this is textbook major depressive disorder. I mean, Kurt didn't hate life, not that we know, but he hated being in the pain, right? He hated being in pain inside that life, right? Depression doesn't kill creativity. It just taxes it emotionally until you're so exhausted you don't know what to do. And in this case, he decided to go ahead and take his life. I'm sure many of you listeners also know this feeling. You can perform, right? You can do everything your parents want you to do. You can do everything that society tells you to do. You can do everything that your boss wants you to do. You can succeed, right? You can do well. You can get accolades for these things. You can get awards. You can get kudos, right? Kudos. Like whoever came up with that concept. Kudos. All right. But guys, the problem is even with success, right? It still all felt muted. I mean, depression mutes everything. It's like that gray cloud that hangs over everything. Depression is also linked to heightened self-focus and emotional depth, hence great music. I mean, the guy was a super talent, super creative, and really tied in and sort of with his own pain. And as we know, let's be honest, pain disorders also strongly correlate with mood disorders. And so, that stomach pain, right, and sort of dealing with that almost intolerable day after day after day struggle got too much. He developed the depression possibly because of that. There's also the bipolar spectrum. And for this little gem, we've got Ernest Hemingway. Write a novel, fight a bull, collapse. Guys, Hemingway lived like a manic episode with a typewriter, and I should know. Look, some of the documented behaviors that we know about this guy, right? I mean, he would go through these extreme productivity bursts. He would stay up for days on end, just going through these periods of sort of manic creativity. He was extremely reckless, right? I mean, he would take like crazy war zones, bullfights. I mean, this guy was all over the place. And as we know, that's a symptom of the bipolar disorder, right? Risky moves. He drank a lot. I mean, this guy was an alcoholic, heavy alcohol use. And again, we know that people with mood disorders oftentimes will self medicate with things like marijuana, right? They'll use depressants like alcohol, etc. Now, the problem for this guy is he'd go through these really high highs, right? He felt like he was on top of the world, and then he would go straight into the down low, if you will. Major depressive disorder. I mean, guys, Hemingway would get so low that he had multiple suicide attempts before he died, right? Some of the patterns that we see, with bipolar disorder, and again, I know these things well because I also suffer from something called cyclothyme. Here's the pattern. Hypomania, you feel on top of the world, which leads to sort of grandiosity, which means you think you're super good, right? At everything you do, which leads to overinflated confidence and then output. And then the second part of the cycle hits. You get the depression. And everything that you did during your manic cycle is now a shameful moment. You feel empty. You're looking at your credit card statement and all the self-destruction that you sort of incurred, right? That you wrought on yourself. And you're like, oh no, what's the point? I'm never going to get it right. Right. I mean, have you ever had a phase where you just felt untouchable? Like you were so locked in that you could not be stopped no matter what got in your way. You felt brilliant, right? Your mind was going 100 miles an hour. You felt like you were creative. You were making, poetry. You were singing songs. You were learning the guitar. You felt like sleep was optional. And then suddenly, you couldn't answer texts from anyone, right? I mean, you felt like you were up here and then you were down here and then you were way down here, right? Everything felt kind of pointless at that point, right? That is the sick genius of the bipolar disorder. You go from feeling on top of the world like you are a king to feeling like you are a worthless piece of garbage. Bipolar energy is launching 3 life projects and then ghosting your own soul. It ain't fun. I mean, that's Kay Redfield, right? Kay Redfield Jameson, Touched with Fire. Thought it was a beautiful way to put bipolar energy. All right, let's go on to another little dude. Let's look at OCD and Nikola Tesla, the man who counted everything. Right? Tesla was not quirky. He wasn't. But this dude was ritual driven, my dudes. I mean, some of the documented behaviors for Tesla was compulsive hand washing. This is the sort of the gold standard, if you will, of the OCD. He had an obsession with the number 3. And this is actually fairly common in OCD circles, right? 7, 3, there's some 13, right? They're very superstitious a lot of the time. OCD is oddly occultic in some ways, right? Or a belief in those types of things, right? It has to do with the superstitions and whatnot. I mean, this dude refused to touch hair or jewelry. I mean, he would touch other stuff. He wouldn't touch hair. He wouldn't touch people's jewelry. He wouldn't touch any jewelry. He had intense sensory aversions. I mean, these are classic OCD traits, right? He had the intrusive disgust thoughts. Things gross you out, whether that be some kind of germ, dirt, right, whatever. The compulsions then kick in. So a compulsion is a sort of like an uncontrollable action as a result of the obsession, which is the uncontrollable thought. And what these compulsions are really there for is to neutralize that anxiety that you're getting from the obsession, right? If you're obsessing about, if you're fearful about, whether you're going to get sick, you might go like tons of hand washing and whatnot. And that would be your compulsion. You got the ego dystonic distress, right? You don't enjoy it. Like the OCD people, when they're doing these things, they know they're doing them and they do not like it. They do not like it. It's not like they're like, ooh, I love lining up all my pencils on the table every time. I love avoiding all the cracks in the sidewalk. I mean, it's that feeling when your brain says, if you don't do this exactly right, something bad will happen, right? OCD isn't neatness. It's your brain yelling fire when there's just a little smoke. I mean, you are on anxiety overload typically. And this is an anxiety cluster disorder. So here we go. Next, I'm going to talk about a disorder that I've talked about before on the channel. And let's be honest, this one's rough. The borderline personality disorder. Now, which famous, personality had this? Marilyn freaking Monroe, baby. Loved by millions. Terrified of abandonment. It was really, really sad. Marilyn didn't just have a sad life. I mean, she had a textbook case of a disorganized attachment. She was the most desired woman in the world for a long time, yet she lived in a constant state of emotional hunger that no amount of fame could ever satiate. Now, what happened with this lady? Why did she feel this way, right? I mean, well, here's some clues. She was abandoned by her father, right? She had a mother who was in and out of psych wards in 11 different foster homes. I mean, Marilyn Monroe had a really rough, sort of like chaotic childhood. And this is a recipe for this thing called identity diffusion. All right, identity diffusion. Basically, what this means is that when no one mirrors you as a child, you spend your life sort of wearing masks to see which one makes people stay. You try on all sorts of personalities, hoping one of them is going to stick and make people love you. Right? Some of the patterns we see are idealization and devaluation. I mean, she would put people on pedestals, Joe DiMaggio, Arthur Miller. And then the moment they showed their human frailty, the pedestal crumbled. We call this splitting. The brain's inability to hold the idea that someone can be both good and disappointing at the same time. It's a really toxic trait to have, unfortunately. And research by Marsha Linehan, and this is sort of the lady that shed some real new light on BPD. And she found that the traits often stem from emotional vulnerability, but it's paired with something really, really not so great: the invalidating environment. Marilyn's environment was the ultimate invalidator, right? We're talking Hollywood. This is a place where people go to go crazy. This is where people go for careers to die. I mean, we've got so many starving actors and actresses that it's become a cliche at this point. And I mean, Marilyn's borderline traits were not drama. They were a love song played at a volume so freaking high that it blew out the speakers. I mean, she wasn't seeking attention, she was seeking a pulse. She needed her life to feel more fulfilled. And she was looking for it in a lot of different people. You've also got the narcissistic traits, the narcissist. And we're going to go way back for this one. We're going all the way back to Napoleon Bonaparte, the small man with the galactic freaking ego. You know what I'm talking about. You got the little man syndrome. These people that are short, so they feel like they got to like puff their chest up and like fight every tall guy on the planet. Like, guys, leave us alone. We just want to live our lives. But Napoleon wasn't just ambitious. I mean, this dude was psychologically reinforced by power. Right? I mean, he was successful and he gained a lot of power really fast. And this reinforces narcissism. I mean, he already had the traits of like grandiosity, right? And entitlement. And then he freaking conquers a big portion of the world at the time. I mean, my goodness, of course he's gonna feel entitled. This dude felt like he was the man. I mean, he's the next great thing since what? Alexander the Great, as far as world conquering goes. And then he would get really pissed. He would rage at disrespect, especially around his myth building, because he liked to sort of build up this fantasy. And when people wouldn't agree with this, or when they would challenge sort of his fantasy, right, he would lose it because he was obsessed with his legacy. I mean, that was probably the most important. I mean, a lot of people died because Napoleon was obsessed with himself. Narcissistic traits, they emerge in power vacuums, baby. Even if you've not shown those traits before, they will pop out sometimes because you have so much power. Because success rewards arrogance, right? When you feel like you did something well and then you look back and say, that was all mine, I did all of that. I mean, that rewards that. That success is rewarding that arrogance. You're super arrogant and then you're successful. You're like, see, there's also a lack of correction. Even a powerful dude, and not many people would argue with him. And this just reinforces pathology, really. You ever noticed how some people get worse the more praise they receive? Yeah, that was Napoleon. I mean, narcissism isn't loving yourself, it's needing the world to never stop clapping. I mean, we're still talking about this guy. I mean, his ego's getting fed right from the grave, baby. All right. The dependent personality pattern. Queen Marie Antoinette. Tell me what to think, right? People think Marie Antoinette was arrogant. She wasn't. She was not. She was autonomy deficient. And in psychology, dependent personality traits involve an over reliance on others to make even basic life decisions. Marie was moved like a chess piece from Austria to France at 14. She was never taught how to have an internal locus of control. She lived in a society where women were basically just told, you marry him, you marry him, you marry him. And then you do whatever they want you to do, which in the, in the wealthy circles usually involves sitting on your ass all day. I mean, guys, she didn't buy diamonds because she was greedy. She bought them because she didn't know who she was without the trappings of royalty. I mean, this lady didn't have a life outside of being queen. She deferred to her mother. She deferred to her husband. She would defer to her favorites because standing alone felt like a death sentence. I mean, this was one of the most powerful people in the world, and she was totally dependent on other people to make decisions for her. When you have no self-differentiation, shout out to Bone, right? You cannot lead a country because you're too busy trying to please the three people closest to you. I mean, you do not want one of these people in charge of the nuclear codes. Ooh, look at me, Kim. I'm going to push the nuclear button today. Yeah, that's not a good idea. I mean, dependency looks like loyalty until independence is required, right? Marie Antoinette didn't lose her head because she was evil. She lost it because she was waiting for someone else to tell her where to put it. You've also got dissociation, right? Hugh Hefner, the man who never grew up. He didn't have dissociative identity disorder, but he definitely suffered from something that we call identity compartmentalization. Some of the traits behind this are, emotional avoidance, check, persona-based living, check, right? I mean, that you build up sort of this persona that's much bigger than really who you are. And you sort of just live off that. It's like a lot of the influencers we got out there, right? Hedonism as a defense, right? Come on. Avoidance of intimacy. I mean, these are all sort of textbook. Now, dissociation isn't forgetting who you are, right? It's refusing to meet him. You don't dissociate by losing yourself. You never knew who that person was in the first place. And a lot of this stuff also comes from the childhood, right? Never sort of like building a strong, grounded sort of personality type. But it also happens because of trauma. And then next we got Charles Darwin, the man who thought himself sick to death. I mean, he had generalized anxiety disorder, my dudes. Darwin proved we came from monkeys, right? But he spent most of his life feeling like a hunted gazelle. Now, this is the perfect example of somatization, right? Where the mind's anxiety manifests as physical agony, chronic vomiting, heart palpitations, shivers, right? For decades, doctors looked for a physical bug with this guy. And I mean, this is a guy who pretty much turned the world on its head, right? At least later on down the road. Modern psychology looked at him in a totally different way, right? Instead of looking for some kind of physical ailment that was the problem, they looked at his rumination, right? Darwin knew his theory of evolution would kill God in the eyes of the public, right? Or at least in the eyes of a lot of the public, including his very religious wife. I mean, he was married to a woman who was very staunchly Christian. And so as a result, he became a virtual recluse, right? And it wasn't shyness. I mean, it wasn't just shyness, although he was fairly shy. It was probably more agoraphobic avoidance, right? If he stayed in his garden, the world couldn't attack his ideas or his stomach, right? I mean, high IQ individuals often use intellectualization as a defense mechanism, right? And that's exactly what Darwin tried to do. I mean, Darwin tried to categorize the whole world to distract himself from the chaos inside his own chest, right? Darwin discovered survival of the fittest while being personally defeated by a spicy lunch. I mean, mark that, dude. A stressful letter? That sent him off the rails. I mean, anxiety is just your brain rehearsing tragedies that never booked a venue, right? And he went through this constantly. All right. Next, we have the paranoid schizophrenic. Now, this is going to be a little harder to throw onto someone because this is a pretty serious disorder. It's very difficult to diagnose. We have King Ludwig II of Bavaria, the Mad King, they called him. And I mean, what are some of the documented, traits or symptoms that he had? Well, we knew the guy was delusional. I mean, he believed in things, and what delusions are, you believe in something that is not consistent with reality. So, like, if I thought I was Jesus Christ, that would be delusional because I am clearly not Jesus Christ. I mean, his hair is much, much too luscious for me. There's also the social withdrawal, right? He would do this. He would spend hours and hours in his room alone. He would create these grand architectural projects, right? He had persecution beliefs, right? He thought everyone was out to get him. He had tasters that would taste his food because he thought he was going to be murdered by poisoning. It's not funny. It is really just tragic neurobiology without treatment. All right. Now, I want to get to another strange one. Let's call this sex addiction, compulsive behavior, right? Lord Byron, romance on fire, baby. And what are some of the patterns, right? Novelty seeking, impulsivity, right? These are pretty common among sex addicts. Emotional emptiness masked by conquest, right? A lot of the time, people with sex addictions, they feel really empty inside. They don't feel like they're loved. They don't feel like they can love, right? And so what they do is they fill that void with as many partners as they can in the bedroom. Yeah. Sex addiction isn't libido. It's an actual disorder. It's dopamine with abandonment issues. Now, here's what every one of these people had in common. They weren't broken. They were just unregulated. They lived in eras without therapy. They lived in an era without the SSRIs, with the dopamine agonists, etc. They lived in an era where there was really not a lot of language for emotions. I mean, there just wasn't. They didn't know how to handle these things. Right? There was no psychological literacy, my dudes. We don't study them to judge them, but we study these people to understand ourselves, to recognize ourselves better. Because untreated traits, they don't disappear, my guys. They just scale with success, right? These were all extremely successful people living with horrible disorders. We study these people so we can see these things in ourselves because these traits don't just disappear, right? Success doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're not depressed. Finding a partner all of a sudden doesn't get rid of your anxiety disorder. So ask yourself, which of my traits would get dangerous if rewarded? Ask yourself, what am I managing versus what am I avoiding? Plant that thought. I'm Mike, and remember, genius without self awareness is just chaos with a fan base. Later, peeps.